We're going to talk about web services today. And our presenter is going to be my colleague Steve Sharp here at VCGI. Before we jump into actually doing the webinar, I'm going to go over a brief overview about how to use the GoToWebinar interface for anybody that hasn't used it before. I apologize to all of you who have used it before. This is all review, but we'll be pretty quick. So the most important thing to know about is the fact that your GoToWebinar panel can be opened and closed using this little orange button with the white arrow in it. So if you just click on that, it can move it out of the way or open it back up depending on what you're trying to do. If you do go ahead and look at what else is in your panel, you will see that you have an audio section. So if anybody's having issues with sound, go ahead and open up that audio panel. Make sure you've got your audio mode set to the proper setting. And then you can also click on audio setup. And if you need to call in rather than using a mic and speakers, don't use the phone number that's actually on your screen. Use the one that's over in your audio panel. As we go through the webinar, you're welcome to type in questions. You're all muted, so you don't have to worry about sounds going on in your background. If you'd like to ask questions, you can type them in, and they will come to me as the organizer, so you don't have to worry about interrupting Steve. We will probably save most of the questions till the end. I will take a look at them every so often, though, so if there's one that seems pertinent to the moment that shouldn't really wait, I will go ahead and interrupt him and let him know about that. And then we're going to be recording this webinar, and it will be posted at the VCGI YouTube channel, and I'll show you where that is in just a moment or how to get to that. You'll also receive an email after the webinar's over with that link. Let's see. The one final thing I want to do to make sure that everyone can hear me is if you look on your GoToWebinar panel, you'll see a little button that looks like an orange hand with a green arrow. That is the hand raising button. So if everybody could click on that, that gives me some reassurance that you can all hear me. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, and I think that's all I need to say. When you sign off of this webinar at the end, you'll receive that email. Actually, I think even before you receive the email, you'll immediately be taken to a very, very brief feedback survey, and I'd really appreciate it if you filled that out and give us any ideas you have for other webinars that you would like to see. All right, so I'm going to move over to our website. Just very briefly show you that if you were to go to the front page of the VCGI website, down in the lower left you'll see a Connect with Us and then a little bar of links to various social media options, and our YouTube channel is linked from there. There's other places it's linked from as well, but that's probably the easiest one to remember. And you can see that we've got recorded webinars posted there. Okay, that's all I need to go over. As I said, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in and send them. They'll come to me. I can respond directly to you as well via text. So don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. So I think I'm ready to pass it over to Steve if he's ready. You ready, Steve?
I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. All right, I'm going to make you the presenter, so we're going to pass over control to your computer.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. You're all set.
All right. Great. Thank you. So, yes, this is Steve Sharp. I'm the Director of Enterprise GIS Services here at VCGI. And one of the things that I manage here are VCGI's web services. So, as the title of the webinar today suggests, we're going to be focused on web services, and really what I'll be doing is providing just an overview of the web services that are available from VCGI and talk about how you can take advantage of those services within ArcGIS Desktop, both the latest version, 10.1, as well as older versions, and also how you can access these web services using open source tools as well. So The first thing I want to show you is where on our website you can go to get access to our web services and the listing there. So as you can see, I'm going to click under the Data and Imagery section, and in there's a link to web services. And we have three categories. We have geocoding services, imagery services, and map services. And I'm going to talk briefly about the distinction between those. Geocoding services are services that you can use to geocode an address. They're often called locator services or geolocator services, so you'll hear the terminology sort of used interchangeably, but in general it's about being able to geocode addresses. Imagery services are services that are focused on providing access to aerial photography. It could be satellite imagery as well. In our case, all of the imagery services we have are aerial photography, either the Vermont orthophotography or other imagery sources that are in the public domain. In the last category we have our map services, and these can be sort of loosely grouped into various types of base maps. As we get into that, it'll begin to make a little more sense, hopefully. The other thing that's worth noting is that some services are cached and some services are dynamic. And the distinction is that a cached service is one that's similar to what you would get from Bing or Google, in that the maps have been pre-rendered at specific scales, and so they tend to be faster to render, so you get a performance benefit from cached services. Dynamic services are pretty much what it sounds like. They take the request from the client, from the user, and they dynamically generate a map. They tend to provide more functionality, being able to turn layers on and off and do other things like identify operations, but they also tend to be slower because they're dynamic. So it's good to be aware of those distinctions. So let me just do a quick sort of review of the services here, and then we'll get into detail. So if I click on geocoding services, you'll see documentation here for the geocoding services that are available. Imagery services, if you click on that, you'll see a link there that provides a listing of those imagery services. And under map services, you'll see a listing there as well of services that are provided. One thing that's worth noting here that I'll highlight here at the top, if you can see that highlight, is that really this is all done in collaboration with our partners in the Vermont Enterprise GIS Consortium, which is a consortium of state agencies as well as regional and federal organizations. So we work in cooperation with them to make all of this possible. So let me jump right in and show you how you can take advantage of these services within ArcGIS Desktop. And the first thing I'm going to focus on right now is the latest version of ArcGIS Desktop 10.1. So I have it already open. I have ArcMap open here. I have a session running. And the easiest thing to do, and right now I'm going to show you map services, is to go to our website, and what you'll see is we've got these links here where it says link to layer file, and it indicates that it'll open automatically in ArcGIS 10 Plus. So in this case I have this VCGI base map. It's in state plane meters as noted here. What's important to note is all of our services we offer in both Vermont state plane meters as well as Web Mercator, and depending on what you're doing you want to think about which one is most appropriate. In a lot of cases, folks are, if they're using ArcMap, ArcGIS Desktop, they're probably working, especially if they're doing work in Vermont, they're probably working in Vermont State Plane Coordinate System. So this would be the appropriate choice in that case. In other cases, if, for example, you want to do use these services in it to build a web application, which is beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today, But these services can be used to create mashups. And so that's where the Web Mercator would most likely come in, where you could have a web mashup that would allow the user to switch, for example, between a Bing map and a Google map and a VCGI base map or one of these others that are listed here. So let me jump into this example here, the base map, looking at the state plane coordinates. If I click on that, I'm using Internet Explorer. It's prompting me. If I want to open it, I'm going to tell it to go ahead and open it. And assuming all is well, then what you'll get is a map. So most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the idea of web services. The real advantage here, and why we titled this presentation "No More Data Downloading," which is sort of also a question mark as well, is that, for example, if all you need is a quick and simple base map and want to avoid having to download all of these base map features, then something like this, our base map service, is something that would make life easier for you. So that's why it's something that's good to be aware of. You can turn layers on and off here. So that gives you that, again, dynamic capability. In this case, this is a dynamic service, which gives you control over layers and what is turned on and off. The look and feel of this is the same look and feel that we've had for a number of years. It's not the most modern look and feel. We recognize that. It's one that is carried over from the past. We're actually doing some work on improving and coming out with a new base map, a dynamic base map service that will hopefully be a little more cartographically attractive and more modern looking. So that's an example of a dynamic base map, bringing it right into ArcMap. What I also wanted to show you is some examples of some of the other base maps in here. You can see we've got contours, such as this here. We've got USGS topographic maps, and those are the newest US topo maps that have been loaded into a map service. We have Hillshade, as well as this Hillshade Plus, which includes hillshade, contours, and hydrography. And let's take a look at that right now. So again, I can just click here and hit open. And assuming all is well, we will get that. Now, what I have here is a sort of an order issue, so I'm going to put this on the bottom. So now I've sort of enhanced that base map that I had before with some hillshade. In the case of this Hillshade Plus, as I zoom in, I'm going to get more detail from the hillshade. So as you can see here, now I have hillshade that has contours, and as I zoom in further, I will get greater and greater detail from those contours. And again, the idea here is that these services can be consumed or used, maybe that would be a better word, in both ArcGIS Desktop as well as in other tools. I'll talk about the open source later. Nothing's been downloaded. I haven't had to download, gigabytes of data from VCGI and have to figure out how to use it and symbolize it. I've quickly got a base map here that allows me to have something behind maybe the work that I'm doing. So that's an example of the base map, along with some of the other base maps that we have available. Let me show you real quick. Again, like I said, the easiest way is to go to our website, as I showed you here, and follow the links. But if you want to add it manually, you can add a link to our map server. And let's go there. So if you go in ArcGIS and you go to your GIS servers, you can do a Add ArcGIS. You want to choose the Use GIS Services option. And then in there, this is where you would type VCGI's server. So it's maps.vcgi.org. Follow the example. Unfortunately, the example is a little misleading in that we don't use the 6080. So it's ArcGIS services. And this is documented on the website. It tells you how to do this, so you don't have to try to remember this right now. So if I hit finish, what I'll see now is a ArcGIS on maps.vcgi.org as a user access. Okay, so now if I drill in there, you'll see I have folders of different services. Now the majority of the services that we have are services that are bundled under the EGC, meaning they're part of the Enterprise GIS Consortium's Web Services suite. They're part of the Web Services strategy that the Enterprise GIS Consortium is working to implement. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here. And this has the VCGI specific base map. So for some of the more advanced users, you may want to go ahead and just create this connection here. The advantage of that is I can always just come right back. It's already saved. I can go right in there. I can drill right down, and if I know what I want, I've got it all right here. So that's good to be aware of that. The other thing that I wanted to show you here was using Imagery. So if we go over to Imagery Services, again, it's the same kind of idea. There's a list of services here. It specifies whether it is in state plane or whether it's in Web Mercator. So we can show you an example here using the traditional, actually let's not get traditional, let's get different here. Let's look at some best of color infrared imagery. So again, if I click on that and hit the open, it has loaded the color infrared. Some of you may not be familiar with color infrared imagery, but what it is most color imagery is 3 bands. It's in this case, this is 4 bands, and the 4th band includes the near infrared. So the nice thing about this color infrared imagery is that it highlights vegetation really well. So what we're seeing here as I zoom in is statewide NAEP imagery. This is 2011 NAEP, and in the case of the NAEP, it's a 4-band imagery product. If I zoom in further, as I get in further, in this case I'm going to zoom into the Virginia area. Now what I'm seeing is, once again, the color infrared, but it's the Vermont orthophoto color infrared. So the new latest Vermont orthophotography is color now. In the past, they were only black and white. But not only is it color, it's actually a 4-band imagery product. So that means it includes that 4th band, or the near infrared band, which, as you can see here, does a really good job of highlighting vegetation. This is taken in the spring. This is most likely, I'm trying to remember what the 2012 was, but it's late April, I believe. And so what we're seeing here is these fields in this area, the grass or vegetation has begun to grow, and it's come out this pinkish color. The other areas are still bare ground, and as you can see, it's this sort of steel gray blue color. The other thing that's really nice about color infrared is it really pops out the conifers. So as you can see here, the deciduous versus the conifers really stand out really well. So depending on what you're doing, this is really a nice imagery. The point being here, less about the color infrared than it is about the fact that, again, I didn't have to download anything. I was able to use this directly without downloading.
Hey, Steve, can I interject a quick question? Someone asked whether it's possible to change the symbology on these services, and I actually took the liberty of answering no, but then I realized you were demonstrating one of the ways that you actually can, right as I was saying that. So I just want to make sure with, like, the base map, is there any ability to change stuff the way it looks?
Yes, unfortunately on the base map, there is no way of doing that. That's a limitation of ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Desktop. Now, the latest version of ArcGIS Server does allow what's called dynamic layers. And dynamic layers does allow for changing of symbology. However, there's a limitation. You can only do that with web-based clients. You can't do it within ArcGIS Desktop. Don't ask me why. Seems kind of weird. I would love it if they would allow that, but it would only be possible with a web browser type client.
Meaning a mashup.
Yeah, mashup, that kind of thing, and it has to be. Has to be done programmatically by the programmer. Now, I would hope and suspect that with time that will change. Our hope is that we would provide access to base map and eventually really all of our data through services and allow people to symbolize it as they see fit. But I will use that as a segue to say that you can manipulate how the imagery is shown. So in this example here where I have this color infrared, I can go to the properties and I can go to symbology and I can actually change things. So for example, I could go to this whoops, I think I need to switch it to current display. And if I do that, let's see if I get any change. Nothing obvious, doesn't look like. Let me try that. See if I can prove myself right or wrong here. Let's see here, if I go to % clip and hit apply. You see, you may have seen a change. I don't know if you can see that. It's a bit of a subtle change. See if I can do something a little more obvious. None of these are very obvious, I'll admit. See if I can put some crazy numbers in here to make it a little more obvious. So you may be seeing some of these changes, but I guess if you can't notice, you'll just have to believe me that with the imagery services, you can actually change the band combinations and the stretch and that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty cool capability that's available to you. One little tip here that's undocumented is that what I found is that you need to use the from the current display. If you use the from the image service, it doesn't seem to do anything. So there's a little gotcha for you, is it's got to be from the current display, and you can apply your changes there. So I think that's enough of that. And Leslie, are there any other questions that I should answer right now?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. Let's jump into, oh, I know what it was, I forgot. Here we go. Okay, so let me show you one other thing, which is, let me load in some color here to show you that and show you, hate to show you bugs, but it's good to be aware of bugs. And so in this example, you'll see I've loaded this to my base map, but you'll see, you know, where's the imagery? How come it's not showing up? Now, notice that you may notice a slight difference in the name. This says no cache over here, and this says cache. This one has cache, but it's for some reason ArcGIS is not recognizing the cache. So what's important for you to realize is if you have trouble, like I'm having, with this service, there's this option. If I right-click, I can select, by default, it enables the cache view because it sees that there is cache on the server, but for some reason ArcGIS doesn't seem to be able to use it. Again, we're working with the SRI on trying to figure out what this is all about, but the simple solution is to just switch that off so that it's not using the cache, not trying to use the cache. And what you'll see is that it works. So really all you're losing is the fact that you're not getting the performance benefit of the cache, and but the performance isn't too bad, so I think it's still usable. And again, you also do have that ability to also control how things are displayed to the degree that you want to be able to manipulate the stretch that's applied. So let me jump to using how you would use these services if you didn't have 10.1. Older versions of ArcGIS can use these services, but you have to access them through the Open Geospatial Consortium's Web Map Service Protocol. So let me show you how you would do that. I'll start a new blank here. Don't need to save that. And this is essentially a workaround, I guess you could say, for those running older versions of ArcGIS Desktop. As long as they're not too old, they will support the OGC Web Map Service. So again, if I go back to the website, in this case I'm going to go back to Map Services, you'll see in here that we have a little URL for older versions, 9.3 plus, so in other words less than 10.1. It's a little not very obvious here, but basically if you're using a version less than 10.1, then you want to use this open source method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this URL here, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit Add Data, and I'm going to go under my GIS servers, and you'll see a Add WMS. So that's the OGC Web Map Service Protocol, and that's what we want to use. So I want to keep the HTTP in there, and I'm going to paste this, and then I'll do Get Layers. Now you'll see I've got all of these layers here available. All right. So I can go ahead and hit OK now. And now I've got a connection here. You'll see to the VCGI base map, in this case the state plane. Whoop. So I'll double click that. I'll select that there. I'll tell it to add. Now here's, while we're talking about bugs, here's another one that's fun. As you saw before, when I added that base map, I can show you again. This is going through the OGC protocol. It looks weird, like things aren't showing up. If I go back and add that, I've had the good fortune of having 10.1, and I were to add it, wrong folder, if I were to add it here, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to do that. You'll see that it actually renders everything. So there is some kind of weird way in which ArcGIS server doesn't seem to return the correct response by default through the OGC Web Map service. And we'll see a similar result when I show you the open source QGIS example. It's not the end of the world though, because all you need to do essentially is go in and turn these layers on. So you'll see as I turn these on, some of these are scale dependent, so they're not going to come on right now. But as I turn these on, you'll see things are starting to show. So what it means is that if you have an older version, you can access these services, but you're going to need to load it, and then you're going to need to go in and do what I'm doing right now. You're going to have to turn these things on, or at least certainly the ones that you want to have on. And in the end, you'll get what you would get if you were using version 10.1. So that's the example there of how to use these services with an older version. Again, as I said, the on-off, you have to go in and make sure those are set properly. The same methodology is going to work as well with the imagery services. So let's do that example real quick here. And let's see, let's do black and white for old time's sake. I'm going to copy that. That's there. Another thing that's worth noting here, and this is sort of a little technical detail, you'll notice that it kind of looked weird when I loaded that, like it was sort of stretched out looking. Let's see, turn that on. Go back to the state view. That's because if we look at the coordinate system of the data frame, it didn't come in a state plane. The reason for that is because this service is advertised as being available both in state plane as well as geographic WGS 1984. And because the server responds with the available coordinate systems in a particular order, the one that happens to be first in the list is the world WGS 84 as opposed to the state plane. So that's why it's doing that. But you can easily switch it right over if you prefer, and it'll change it to state plane. So it can respond to either and project the information on the fly. So what I wanted to show you here was how to add the imagery. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to Add WMS. I'm going to paste that which I had copied from right here. I'm pasting that in there. I'm doing get layers. In this case, there aren't a bunch of layers. It's not a dynamic service. It's a pre-cached image service. So now I have it here. You're probably going to want to rename these things so they aren't these generic names. I'm not going to bother with that right now. And I'm going to go ahead and add that. Keeps warning me about coordinate system here. And as you can see, I've got black and white available there. And if I were to zoom in, there we are. The distinction here that you're seeing in this line is between versions. So the stuff to the north is the older orthophotography that was based on an older specification, and the stuff that you're seeing down below that arguably is a little better is the newer 2012 that is based on a different set of specs. So again, as you can see, if you're using an older version of ArcGIS, you'll want to use the OGC WMS to load these services. If you, one way to work around, I'll mention one more thing that's in my notes here. As I mentioned before, the sort of little bug where you have to go in and turn all these things on for it to work properly. Once you do that, if this is something you want to use regularly, you could just save as and save it to an MXD that's a template, or you could right-click and save as a layer file, and that layer file would then be saved with all of the things turned on the way you want them. You could even, if you wanted, group these into a group and call them VCGI Web Services, and you could just save that entire thing as a layer file for yourself to use later, and then you have a quick, easy access to these things. So,
hey Steve.
Yeah.
Before you leave ArcGIS, there was a question about one other thing you didn't cover with the imagery, which was, is there a way to access information about the age or which series of imagery it came from?
Ah, yes. I knew that was going to come up. So let me give you the partial answer, probably not the total answer you'd want to hear. So let's go take a look at that. Well, here we go. So I'm going to use through the OGC method. You're not, I don't believe, going to be able to get anything. We can actually try it, see what happens. But through 10.1, again, if I add this imagery again in here, And again, I'm going to disable cache view so it'll actually work. If I zoom in here, let's take a look at that same area that we were looking where we saw the boundary between the older and the new, and let's see what we find out. If we use the identify tool, and I do an identify here, you'll see in the results, this first number is just the pixel value. So you have 0 to 256, I believe. Could be off on that. Maybe it's 254. And this other result that came back, as you can see, has the actual imagery data set. What VCGI does is we build what are called mosaic data sets. And these mosaic data sets are essentially what they sound like they are. They are mosaics of tiled imagery. And because those individual tiles within a data set may be acquired over different dates. So for example, in this case, this is you look down here, you'll see the year is 2007. So that means this older stuff up here, this a little more sort of washed out black and white up here, is from 2007. So you have the year, but you don't know the date. And the reason for that is because the individual tiles within that data set have different dates. And for whatever reason, those don't get exposed at this level. So really all you're going to get is the year, and then you have to just know, based on the nature of the data, the general time of year. So for example, if it's leaf off orthophotography, Vermont orthophotography, it's going to tend to be April or May, typically mid to late April or early May. So for example, in this case, you would be fair to say that this is 2007 in the April-May time frame. If you need to know exactly, then that's where you're going to have to get the information, the actual data from us. It's not going to be exposed through these web map services. So if the year is all that matters, then you're pretty much going to get it. In this case, again, I click here on this lower one, and again, I can see that's 2012. So hopefully for most of you, just knowing the year is sufficient. And this will give that to you. Does that hopefully at least partially answer the question?
Yes. And as Steve said, if you need more information, more detail than that, you can feel free to contact me, and I can actually show you how to get into the metadata a little bit to figure it out to some extent in the index maps, but you can always just call us about that.
Yeah, if you need to know the exact day, then you're going to have to go deeper. Our hope would be that at some point we could find a way to make it available, at least through our website and a web application that would allow you to easily do that, such as through our interactive map viewer, to have an easy way to have a little tool where you could click and it would give you the exact date that the image was acquired as opposed to just the year. But just remember, orthophotos are taken in the spring. Leaf off is typically always in the spring, and the leaf on are usually in the summertime, and that tends to be, July, August, September often for the NAPE imagery. So that should give you a general sense of the time of year for that particular year that you'll get from doing the identify tool. I think we're ready to jump now to the open source so we don't run out of time here. Let me quit out of ArcGIS, and I'm going to switch over to QGIS. I just downloaded and installed the latest version yesterday, so hopefully we'll have luck here. So all the services except for geocoding you can access through OGC Web Map Services. And that includes using open source clients such as QGIS. And I'll talk about QGIS because that is one of the open source clients that VCGI provides some training for. Actually, Leslie does that. So it's a good one to to use as an example. So if I go into QGIS, there's a bunch of options here, but there's one which is add WMS layers. So that looks familiar to what you saw in ArcGIS. So what I have to do is I have to do a new, okay, and here I'm going to go back over to the website, and let's do the base map one. Again, I'm going to copy this here, and I need to put in the HTTP. Here's a little gotcha, because on our website it's not there, and there's a reason for that. I won't get into it, but it gets all messed up on the website because of how the website works. So you just have to remember, you got to put that HTTP at the beginning of any URL, including this one. Then the name could be whatever you want. I'll just put the VCGI base map SP. Then I'll hit, oh, there's an existing one. I'll tell it to overwrite. Obviously, I've done this already. Now, you'll see that I have some that I've preloaded here. The one I just added is right there. I can say connect. Now it's returned the list of all the layers. So again, this is very similar to what you saw before. But also what you'll find is that there's some tips and tricks on how to use this. And it's going to have that similar kind of issue that we had with ArcGIS Desktop with the open source, where it doesn't seem to turn everything on the correct way. So for example, if I were to add just, if I were to add just the entire thing and hit add, all right, what you'll see is it's not totally working right. And you can't really do anything over here. It's just one big blob. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and instead add individually. So if I add the state boundary and hit add, I've got an individual layer in there. But it's still annoying because look, it says 0. That's not very helpful. So what you need to know is that if you're going to use these in QGIS, these have to be loaded individually. And that's a bit of a hassle, I would admit, but for some reason that seems to be a limitation or a combination of the limitations of ArcGIS server and how it's responding in a strange way, as well as the way QGIS interprets that. So the real simple workaround is just to select the layer you want to load and then type in the name, in this case state boundary. So if I hit add there, now I've got that, and I could repeat that, and I won't do that now because that'd be boring. I could repeat that. Now there are some group layers in here, so for example roads, you've got these individual pieces, so if you want to be able to turn these components on and off individually, then you would need to load them individually. Okay, if you and because of the fact that some of these things don't turn on and off correctly by default, that's what you'll need to do is load whichever layers you want individually from here. What I would recommend if you're using QGIS as a solution and you want to use them in combination with our services is that you go ahead and load the base map layers that you want to use, and then what I would recommend is that you then save the project to some type of template. In other words, save it to a QGIS project. And so when you start a new project, you can open that new base project, and you will have all the base map layers already loaded in there. You've taken care of it once, in other words, and that you could reuse it many times. Let me show you real quick on the imagery. It's the same deal. So it's going to be, let's do something more interesting like the color infrared. I seem to always like that, so I'm going to copy that. And if I go back to here, I'm going to do a new, I'm going to do just real quick color infrared, HTTP, hit OK, and I'm going to connect to that. I'm going to select it. In this case, it's only one, so I don't have to, it's not like the base map one that has a bunch of layers in there. Here I can just put, this is the color infrared, and hit the add. And there we go, I've got the color infrared. Again, just as we saw with ArcGIS, it defaults to the first coordinate system that's advertised by the OGC Web Map service, and in this case it seems to advertise the WJ84 as the service that's the coordinate system that's available, even though you can change it to stay plain. So again, as you can see, it does work. You can get access to our imagery services from an open source client such as QGIS. And let's see, I think I'm trying to think if I'm hitting all my points here.
Can I throw in one more comment about the CRS issue, the coordinate system? If you establish the coordinate system of the project at the beginning by either just setting it manually or by bringing in a data layer that's already in Vermont State Plane, if you do that first and then bring in the services, they will, and in QGIS, if you tell it that you want to do transformation on the fly, it will automatically transform it.
I'm just going to prove it to myself here that this is going to work as well. This is a hillshade. Let's see if I connect.
Ooh.
Oh, looks like I put in a bad, might be a typo. I guess not.
Maybe I've got a typo.
Huh. Well, I guess I proved it to myself. It doesn't work.
I'll try to figure out why later.
I'll have to look into. We'll look into that one. Yeah. Well, it's good to know about things that don't work. So let me jump to the next topic before we totally run out of time here, which is geocoding. And as I mentioned before, all of the services, the image services and the map services, are available both in an open source way as well as the proprietary ArcGIS way. The one that's not is geocoding. That is only usable within ArcGIS, and in this case it must be ArcGIS 10.1. So there are further limitations on it. Now I think, Leslie, were you prepared to show this one?
Yeah. So should we switch over to me, or are you going to try it?
No, because I know has issues for some reason. My box is having issues there with that thing. Let me just provide a quick overview here. So as you can see, geocoding services, what you see here is there's four services that are highlighted here. These services are actually built and maintained by the Vermont 911 board, but hosted by VCGI. So it's a collaboration between VCGI and 911. And what they've done is they built essentially three services that use one which uses the eSite data, which is the address points, another one which is based on name, and another which is based on address range, so road name and address range. Those can be used individually, but they can also be used through this composite, which uses cascades through these as you run the address matching. So this is actually not listed in the actual order in which it cascades. It actually will hit the eSite first, and then it will do road range, and then it will do road name. So if you were to use composite, that's what that's all about. And I guess, Leslie, if you could switch over and give it a try, that'd be great. Leslie, are you muted?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I muted myself because I was coughing a second ago and I forgot to unmute. Okay, so hopefully everybody sees my ArcMap screen, and I'm going to go through the geocoding process, and Steve's going to talk me through it if I do anything wrong. So first I am going to add in a table of data, a spreadsheet, and that is going to be located right here. So it's just an Excel spreadsheet. There it is, and I can look at it briefly. So there it is. It's got a bunch of addresses in it, and we're going to try to geocode those. So we just right-click, and you can see that geocode addresses is one of our options. It takes a second for this to open. And rather than using one of these default options, we're going to add a geocoding service. By going to okay, so sorry, I wasn't talking as I did that just because I want to make sure I was doing it right. So what I did was I looked for my ArcGIS service that I'm already connected to, and if I hadn't already been connected, I would have added an ArcGIS server. But since I'm already connected, I just went in there, and I know that the geocoding services are in EGC services, and you can see that rather than showing me all the other imagery services or map services that are in here, it knows I'm looking for a geocoding service, so it gives me these options. So I'm going to start out with composite, right? Just so that we can try that. So you can see it's looking at my table. Do we want to go into geocoding options and point those out?
Well, first you need to be sure to select your fields. So up there you need to select which, yeah.
Okay, so we set our street or intersection to address, city or place name to town, and we don't do zip code. And I should.
Well, Leslie, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that the geocoder does support zip code. It's just that the input spreadsheet doesn't have zip code in it.
Right.
But I would encourage you, if you have zip codes, if you have addresses with zip codes, then you'd want to take advantage of that.
Okay. And as you can see, this creates an output shapefile, and from practicing yesterday, I've already got a little direction for it to go here, so I'm going to leave that, but that's obviously just navigating to where you want to save it. And then we wanted to point out the fact that by default, the sensitivity settings for these three categories are set at 0, which means, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, because for some reason I always get this backwards. This means that they are not sensitive. In other words, they're not discriminating. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So this means it's going to be easier to get matches by leaving these set at 0. So if we don't want it to be so easy that we end up with bad matches, we might want to put these up around 80. So this is trying to set the bar a little bit higher for matches. And that's for the eSite locator. And if we check the other two, remember this is a composite, so the other two things that are going on in here are the road range and the road names, and those are already set at values. Do you want me to change those?
Well, what I wanted to do was to highlight the fact that these settings do matter. And if you've done geocoding in the past, you'll know that's the case. And so it's important to be aware that even if you're using the geocoding services, these settings are still accessible to you, and you should use the settings to meet the specific needs for what you're doing.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK now. And click on OK again. And you can see that this is giving us the number of matched and the percentage of matched, the number of tied, and the unmatched. and it adds the shapefile that we just created right into the project. We can look in our attribute table and notice that some of the attributes that have been created are the status. So if I sort by that, the M refers to match. So in this column right here, M refers to match, T refers to tied, U refers to unmatched. So it's easy to pull out the addresses that didn't match so that you can try to perhaps manually match those, or to look at the tied results to see how to check those, make sure those are accurate enough for you. And then you've got all the matches. It tells you the score for the match in this column right here. And then it also tells you, wait a minute, that's not what I was going to point out, match type. I thought there was something else I was going to point out in here. And it does have both addresses in there.
Leslie, I think what you wanted to point out, if you can hear me, I just realized I was muted. Location name, so right there to your right,
there we go.
Where you had your cursor,
That's
that
right.
tells you which of the composites. This is why I keep muting because my phone's ringing.
Turn off your ringer.
So yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Great, thank you. That is what I was looking for. So this is so that you can see which of the three in your composite, remember, were used to create that match. So that if that matters to you, and generally speaking, the eSite match is going to be an exact match, or given that it's going by the full address, and then the road range match is much more general because it's just looking at whether that fits within the range for that particular road. And then the other option is the road name, which is even more general because it's really just matching on the road name. Okay. Let's see if there was anything else. So Steve wanted to point out that if your goal is to get as accurate a match as possible and let the ones that don't match fall out, then you might want to limit your geocoding to just using eSite. So remember, we can go back to geocode, we can add, and instead of the composite, we could choose just to use the eSite, and that will be a somewhat more stringent way to do it. And we can again go in here and set our sensitivity level. And you can see we get a little bit less match this way. Right, and we pointed out that in the attribute table you can, oops, sorry, look at status and look for those unmatched ones and pull those out as a separate table. So I think that's all we wanted to point out in here. Is there anything else in the geocoding?
I would just recommend that you read up in the help about geocoding. It will give you some tips and tricks on proper geocoding and how to approach it. You'll notice when it finished running the geocode, batch geocode, it came up with the option to rematch, and if you click that, it would have brought up a interactive dialog box, and you can then manually go through sort of one by one through the addresses that didn't match, and you can yeah, if you hit rematch there, you'll see it brings up this dialog. So learn more about that if you haven't done it before, and you know, learn how to take advantage of what's available there to go in and deal with what remains. This is a good way to go if you don't have a lot of addresses. If, for example, you had 100 addresses and only 10 or 20 didn't match, then this interactive approach can work well. But if you were looking at matching 100,000 addresses and you had to manually match 10,000, then you would need to take a different approach.
Okay. So we've gone over a tiny bit, but if people have questions, you're welcome to send them in now. You can also always send us or send me an email, and I can pass it along to Steve if need be, or I can respond to it if you have questions after the webinar closes. So keep in mind, anyone who didn't hear me say it at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded. It will be posted at VCGI's YouTube page, which you can access from the front page of our website. So if you go to the front page and look down the lower left of the navigation area, you'll see Connect with Us, and you can click on the YouTube link. So I'm not seeing any questions. We might go ahead and wrap it up if I don't see any. Okay, I think everybody had to go back to work. All right, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and look forward to hearing from anyone who does have questions, and let us know what other types of webinars you'd like to see. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time to be on the call.